My first question I'd like to pose to both of you, since it deals with your collaborative history. It's been 7 years since your last film, so I'm hoping over the course of the discussion we can get into how this film was made, but also how collectively your ideas on the film developed over the course of its production. Because your last few films also took fairly unconventional approaches to narrative. I'm thinking, well, your previous film, 11 Minutes, which I think complicated our sort of expectations when it comes to linear storytelling, and then even before that, with Essential Killing, you were stripping down narrative. I think almost
In dialogue, yes.
Into yes, to almost an extreme. And I bring these films up because I think EO develops some of these ideas, and also I think it comes even closer to a kind of pure elemental story, and I think that's also helped by having an animal as your main protagonist. So I guess I'm curious, how this idea began for you, but I'm also curious, what you perceived as the advantages of working with animals, as you did for this film.
It sounds like several questions. So,
sorry.
Which one I should answer?
The last one, the advantages of working with the animals.
The adventures of working with animals.
Or advantages.
The advantage is that they don't intellectualize every single line in a script, which some actors has tendency to do. And also, that they kind of react into the tone of voice, which, that when you talk to your pet at home, you use a different tone of voice. And this is why the pet actually reacts, and you are kind of making a bond. And of course, I cannot use that tone of voice talking to my human actors. They may either not like it, or they may misunderstand it as. Anyway, the animals react to the tone of voice. They have this ability of translating the words into the kind of music which the tone of voice is playing for them. And by the way, this is what I instructed my composer, Paweł Mykietin, whose music you have heard. And Paweł is a classical composer, and very serious one, high class. His symphonies are being played all around the world in all philharmonics. But he doesn't treat the work for the film as stepping down from his Olymp of classical music. He really is ambitious enough, and he gives all his talent into what he is doing. And my instruction for him was, Paweł, when you will see the final version of the film, look for the moments when you will feel like being able to give me the inner monologue of the donkey, because the poor animal doesn't have the voice, doesn't have the ability to speak, but you can give the tune you can give the you know, the suggestion what's going on in the animal's head, and I think he did that very, very well.
Yeah, but it sort of comes back to your question that when you have an animal as a main hero of a film, because you don't have dialogue, you sort of allow yourself to be open to all those, other facets of creativity. You have freedom to create all those fabulous images and music and sound, and it all allows you to sort of, I think, feel films, in a much richer way, not intellectually as Jerzy was kind of mentioning at the beginning. No, I mean it's more kind of instinctive and emotional, and it's like very open also and free.
I do want to get into how you were directing the animals, and I do also want to hear more about the sound at one point. But maybe before we get to these points, I'm curious how you approached script writing differently for this film than your previous films. Knowing, as you said, the unpredictable nature of animals, and also that your lead will not be reading this script or intellectualizing it. So I'm curious, how described this film was in the script itself, and how much was sort of influenced by the animals themselves.
Well, fortunately, the most of the writing, physically writing of the script, is done by Eva. So I can only say that we spend a long time before we start working on the script on researching the subject. That means that we have probably read everything significant what was written about donkeys, starting with Apuleius, through the names
Vidius
Eva will mention.
Yes. And Jimenez and
Yes,
Winnie the
Jimenez,
Pooh, Pinocchio.
So we learned quite a lot about those animals, and we also have seen some attempts on the film to portray donkeys, and nothing actually impressed us except one amateurish film which we by chance found on the Facebook some few years ago, and that was a registration of the village performance of some Italian guy who was walking his donkey, and his performance was that he stopped in the middle of the village, some people gathered, and then he performed something. Maybe you can describe it, Eva. Can you?
Yeah, like a routine of a donkey, like a circus routine with a donkey who's falling down, and then the owner kind of like resuscitates him. But I think you didn't you're not meaning the film classics like Oazar Baltazar, no? Because you said there was
No. I meant this amateur guy in Italy.
Nothing impressive, you said. That you watched all the films about donkeys and you found nothing impressive. That's what you said just a second ago.
Except Oazar Baltazar, but this is the different story completely. Now I am talking about the research which we were grabbing all the little elements, and we found that little amateurish film of 50 seconds, The donkey was pretending that it's either collapses or sick or whatever. He lied down on the ground, and the guy was performing by keeping his front legs, making him, the artificial breathing, Then he was putting his ear to donkey's chest, and eventually it ended up with the kiss of life, mouth to mouth, helping, on which the donkey got up miraculously, and that very few people who were watching it applaud, give the guy a few euros, and he was walking to the next village to do the same. It took us a long time to find this very guy, because meantime we got an idea that if it would be possible to use the same donkey performing that on the ground of villages, if we could get him to the Polish circus and get our actress to perform the same act with him, that would be great beginning of the film. And it took several weeks to find where the guy actually lives. But we got him, and I asked, is it any chance that our actress can perform the same thing? He said yes, but it has to be done on my turf. So no way to bring his donkey to Poland. We had to bring the Polish circus to Italy and to build a little arena in the barn where this very particular donkey called Marietta, the opening scene, Marietta, and we shot it over there. That's the end of that little story.
Do you remember the title of the short film?
It didn't have a title. It was just a little thing on Facebook or YouTube,
No, it was just like some amateurish registration, not even by the guy, somebody took, and that was it. It's probably still over there somewhere in the Facebook.
We'll have to uncover it. You brought up Marietta, one of the donkeys, and so I guess I want to hear more about the others. I guess you mentioned sound as being an important element to, I guess, directing them, but I'm also curious, how you worked with them individually. I would imagine they had, their own personalities, and that maybe worked more for certain scenes and not others. And so I'm wondering if you can just speak to how you parse that out between each of them.
Okay, let's make it as short as possible. So, once we discover existence of Marietta, we didn't know her name yet, but we thought we want that donkey, and I believe that we will get that donkey. But it was of a specific breed, which is called Sardinian donkey, which is light gray fur and black thick hair going across from the head of the donkey up to the tail, and then crossing along front legs. So when we were preparing the film, I called my animal handlers in Poland and I said, get me all Sardinian donkeys available in Poland. And they called almost immediately back. They said, yes, okay, there are 3 Sardinian donkeys in Poland. So we met all 3 of them, and the very first one was called Taco. And Taco is the main one. You see about 60% of the time, screen time, you see Taco. But then I was advised that the best way of working with Taco would be if we employ at the same time the female donkey, and her name was Ola. So we had that couple of donkeys, Taco and Ola. And now let's say that there is an action needed, that Taco will go from point A to point B. So how to do it? You take Taco and Ola, you group them at point A to start with, you walk them both to point B, you leave Ola, the female, at point B, you walk Taco back to point A, but he will be always looking where is she. And then for the action, you just let him go and so that was the easiest trick, obviously. And Ola was the most beautiful one. So whenever we needed a close-up of her beautiful mug, we were using it. So, and because they look exactly the same, you can't tell one from the other. So most of the scenes are shots that both donkeys are there present. In the action shots, like walking, it would be Taco on arrival and having a kind of a mug of satisfaction of reaching the task. It would be Ola, whose face is the most beautiful face of the donkey. Sounds like I am in love with Ola. But you would be too. That was incredible animal, really, you know. If I would have possibility of having donkey as a home pet, I wouldn't hesitate.
And then on the other ones, you know, the three remaining ones, which is Ettore, Rocco, and Mela, were just the Italian donkeys because we didn't want to bring the Polish donkeys, you know, to Italy, where we also did some shooting. And we just, you know, because we cared very much for their well-being and safety, and we didn't want to trouble any of them too much. We just basically, when we are shooting in Italy, we employed exactly the same looking donkeys on the spot in Italy.
Well, frankly, I could listen to you both talk about donkeys all day, but we are very short on time. We have a screening starting shortly, but I do want to ask one more question related to this. Your experience on set, working with animals day in and day out, Jerzy, specifically for you, did this experience change the way you think about directing or think about performance, or just even more broadly nature itself, and you know, ideas that you perhaps intend to bring to your next film?
That brings us back to O Azar Baltazar, which actually should have been the beginning of the whole conversation, but it could work also. Okay. I have seen O Azar Baltazar in the year when it was made, which was 1966. I was a film school student making at the same time my first professional film, which was called Walkover. And the Walkover was screened then in a few cinemas in Warsaw, and by pure chance in one cinema in France, because some guy who had seen the film in Warsaw purchased the print, took it to Paris and showed it in one cinema in Paris. As a result of it, at the end of the year, I received a phone call from Paris, from the editorials of Cahiers de Cinéma, the most influential film magazine in the world, run by Jean-Luc Godard, François Truffaut, Louis Malle, and people like this. And they called wanting to interview me. And I said, you must be mad. Why do you want to to interview the film school student who just made one film. And they said, yeah, we have a reason, because we made the list of the 10 best films of the year, and your walkover took the second place. I kept silent for a while, swallowing the information, and then I asked, and who took the first place? And the answer was, "O Azar Baltazar." So I said, can we postpone this interview for a day or two, because I would like to see that film before we talk. And that's what had happened. I purchased the ticket, went to the cinema, watched the film, and until that very film I was watching all the other films with that semi-cynical, semi-professional look, how the things are being done, why the camera is being put at that angle instead of this angle, why there is a tracking shot, why this, why that. I was trying to learn from the masters, how to make movies. And somewhere, I don't know, in the middle of the film or towards the end of Azar Baltazar, but definitely before the very end, I find myself crying. The tears were running down my cheeks, and especially when that famous final scene of Azar Baltazar, when the donkey is dying in that beautiful scene, being surrounded by the herd of sheep, with the little bells dangling at their necks. And I was simply crying. And
But
that was the lesson.
The answer to the question is which one?
Yeah, I am slowly getting into answering. And I understood that I received the biggest lesson of the filmmaking by watching that very scene and by crying, that the animal character can move you stronger than any phenomenal performance by the greatest actor who would be executing his craft and acting, whatever he can. But somewhere in the back of our minds, we will have that slight suspicion that it is not entirely true, because in a moment the director would say cut, and the actor would jump out of the chair, go for a drink or jokes with his friends or whatever. And this suspicion of not the truth doesn't apply to the animals, because animals don't know what the act is. They don't have the understanding of act. They are just being. So the death of Balthazar was the lesson for me that the strongest emotion, the strongest appeal to the audience can be achieved by giving them the truth. And therefore, I counted that if we cast an animal in the leading part of our film, we will create a lot of chances for some truthful moments which should appeal to people's emotions. And because we made this film out of love for the animals and for the nature, we would be able to offer something which could really reach the audience's hearts and heads. Is that more or less the answer for?
Yes,
Okay.
a very fitting way to conclude. Thank you. Thank you, Jerzy. Thank you, Eva. Thank you for your film. Thank you again for being back.
Thank you very much. Thank you.